welcome back to another episode of Jacey's Creek. My name is Emily, and today we are doing Season 4, Episode 10, Self-Reliance. If you have not already, make sure to follow my Instagram so that way throughout the episode you can talk to me and you can let me know your opinions on this podcast or this episode. And make sure to follow my TikTok, Pacey and Joey, to get more Pacey and Joey content. And lastly, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so that way you don't miss any episodes coming out on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So without further ado, let's get into this. So I believe this episode came out actually on my birthday, but not like my real birthday. My real birthday is like 2003, but this came out in 2000, so there's that. This episode, I believe, came out on December 20th, 2000, so there's that. And there's a lot of stress throughout this episode because of a test. So without further ado, let's get into this. So we have scene 1 of Pacey and Joey, and they're outside the Potter B&B, and Joey and Pacey are waving goodbye to Bessie and Bodie as they get into their truck and leave on their way. And so Joey says, "Bye, don't worry," and I don't think that's something like, "Bye, don't worry," like, should I worry? Like, should I worry? That's how Bessie probably felt. And so Pacey said, "This ain't half bad. The two of us together, 3 nights alone." And Joey said, "Yeah, Pace, alone with a toddler and his terrible twos, and a test tomorrow on a transcription." I have no idea what that word even is. Like, sometimes I'm like, what even is that? And she says, "If that doesn't sound like a prescription for fun, I don't know what is." And Pacey says, "We haven't talked about last night." And Joey says, "Sure we did. And we were both in agreement that you were in the hit at the party." And by the way, what happened last night was the mistletoe between Dawson and Gretchen. And that's what I was talking about last episode. Like, it wasn't like a whole scene where I needed to add it in. But it was one of those things that I talked about last episode where I was like, guys, like, Gretchen and Dawson are kissing and there is like a very awkward tension between Pacey and Joey because of it. And so Pacey said, "No, not the party, the other one." And Joey says, "What, the Learys?" And Pacey says, "Yes, the Leary party. The one with the mistletoe where Dawson was kissing my sister." And Joey says, "Look, Pacey, please, I have so much on my plate right now that to even think about that right now. I mean, I'm up to my eyeballs in Thronation. I haven't even started on Emerson, and we have an hour left until Alexander wakes up from his nap, if we're lucky." And just like that, on cue, Alexander cries, and Joey says, "Brace yourself, this is where the fun begins." And it's kind of like a trial run to see if they'll do good while doing parents. So then we have the second scene where they're at the Potter B&B, and Joey is trying to study when she hears, like, banging, like, bang, 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 bang. And she gets up and goes into the kitchen to find Alexander and Pacey sitting on the floor beating on some, like, pans. And the way that they looked up at Joey was so cute. I'm like, I want content between, like, them being parents would be so funny. And, like, Joey says, "What, may I ask, is going on here?" And Pacey says, "Well, we're doing some reorganizing." And Joey says, "What happened to reading him to sleep?" And Pacey says, "Well, he got a little antsy, and I just thought I let him tire himself out." And Joey says, "I should have known better, Pacey. You always do this." And Pacey says, "What?" And Joey says, "You get him all round up, and now he's never going to sleep, and I'll never get the chance to study." And Pacey says, "You can study right now. Look, I'm telling you, I got the whole baby putting to bed under control." And Joey goes, "Out." And Pacey says, "What? At the kitchen?" And Joey says, "No, out at the house. As in, goodbye, sayonara. You're sleeping at home tonight. You're home." And I like how she really has to rephrase that. I like how Bessie and Bodie trusted Pacey to watch Alexander with Joey. Like, that was a big step. I mean, then again, Joey went on a bus or a boat for 3 months, so there was that. And so Pacey said, no, wait, you can't kick me out. You need me here. And she goes, no, I don't. And Pacey says, yes, you do. And she starts, like, dressing him. She goes, hat. Like, that's so funny. And she, like, pulls the hat down on his head. And he just looks at her like, what are you doing? Like, and he goes, ow, ow, hair, face, okay. And Joey says, coat. And Pacey says, what is this? Look, I can put my own clothes on. And Joey says, look, Pace, look, I really appreciate your intentions are good, but I think I can handle this way better on my own. And Pacey says the typical, like, dad line, oh yeah? Who's gonna look after the baby? And Joey says, goodbye. And Pacey says, I'm looking after the baby. And Joey says, bye, Pace. I'll see you tomorrow. And Pacey says, what? And Joey pushes him out the door and closes it. And Joey says, okay, Alexander, bedtime. Now we can either do this the hard way or we can do this the easy way. And Alexander just looks at her like, I just watched you, like, push that boy out of the room, and now you're like I could have been beating on pans and pots, but you ruined that for me, so now I'm gonna throw a big tantrum. Like, that's what he should have done, but he never did. And so there was a knock on the door, and she opens it. She goes, Pacey, and she opens to find it like a couple of people and not Pacey. And she goes, what part of Goodbye do you not under? And the man goes, we saw your sign and we could really use a room. And Joey says, sure. What's 2 people? And they enter, and there's 2 other children with them, which come in like screaming. And she goes, 4? And the man goes, thanks. And she says, welcome. And you can just tell that Joey is clearly not happy about any of this. She just looks like she just wants to, like, she's like, are you actually kidding me? That's what she looks like. So then we see the next scene, which is scene 1 of Pacey. And he is at Gretchen and Pacey's place, and Pacey is sitting at the counter eating, or at the table eating, and Gretchen comes into the room, and Gretchen says, what are you doing here? I thought you were at Joey's. And Pacey says, oh, I was, but she kicked me out, which is funny enough, which leads me to the question of what I've been meaning to ask you, which is, what the hell were you thinking kissing Dawson at the Leary holiday party the other night? And Gretchen says, oh, you saw that, huh? And Pacey says, oh yeah, I saw it, and so did someone else I know. You know, as much as I would love to erase that image from my mind, I'm afraid it pretty much burned into the creases. And he says, so please explain yourself to me. Tell me why you had to kiss Dawson and not someone your own average age. And Gretchen says, do we have to talk about this before I have my coffee? And Pacey says, yes. And Gretchen says, okay, look, it was an accident. Per mistletoe, okay? And then nothing. He knows that, I know that, it was just a kiss. And Pacey says, there is no such thing as just a kiss, especially not in KSI. Which is true. That was a very true statement, Pacey. And Gretchen says, didn't you people ever play spin the bottle? And Pacey says, no. Fortunately, that quick little 80s tradition of yours have gone down the doo-doo-doo by the time I hit puberty. And Gretchen says, and besides, why do you care about who Dawson kisses? And Pacey says, personally, I don't. But someone I know does. And Gretchen says, okay, why aren't you at Joey's talking about it to her instead of harassing me and drinking all the orange juice? Because he's like over there just drinking like a gallon of orange juice, like no care in the world. He's just drinking it straight up. And Pacey says, I'm not a complete moron, you know. I tried that already. And Gretchen says, and Pacey says, and she hasn't had the time to run around over her mind yet. And Gretchen says, oh, big lie. And Pacey says, yeah, huge lie. So I really got in 2 options. I can either take the high road and pretend I believe what she's telling me, or I could take the low road and force the issues and just come off looking like a huge class jerk. What do I do, Gretch? And Gretchen says, I think you should just be the best boyfriend you could be. I think you should be understanding and sweet and kind. And Pacey says, kind. And if none of those works, and Gretchen says, force the issue. Be a class world jerk. You can do it, Pacey. I know you can. I have complete utter faith in you. So I think in this moment, like, it was kind of one of those things, like, you can always tell when Joey's upset, but I love how, like, Pacey just knows. Like, it's pretty obvious that they know each other as much as they say they do, because it's not like where Pacey doesn't know a thing about her when she gets upset. He just automatically notices, and it's just little things like that. Like, they talk about things, but they don't talk about things. It's like, you kind of go through, like, subtext for a little bit. Like, they don't know whether they should talk about it because he doesn't know whether he's pushing a button. He doesn't know if he's being, like, the overreacted or anything. Well, Joey is just sitting there kind of dealing with her own thing, because she knows if she says anything or she does anything that will, like, bring up this topic, she doesn't know if, like, Pacey is going to handle it as well. And I think it goes back to how people handle things in the past with them. Like, there was a lot of people who, like, ruined things for them. Like, oh, like, they overreacted and they did all this different kind of stuff. And so, therefore, like, Pacey and Joey don't know how to handle things when things come their way. So then we have the next scene, which is scene 1 of Joey. And also, I would like to add along with this part, is one thing I really do think about, like, Pacey and Joey as a couple, when they get, like, when they have to talk about something, they don't really do a good job. And I think this kind of shows, like, yeah, eventually they do a good job about it, but they don't, like, really get into, like, the nitty-gritty stuff. So the scene with Joey in this part is Joey is studying frantically when Dawson comes in and takes the seat next to her and knows that he's trying to study. And Dawson says, "Are you ready for his test?" And Joey says, "Oh, yeah." "Oh, sure, yeah. Why wouldn't I be?" And Dawson says, "Well, I haven't seen Joey Potter with Cliff Notes before." And Joey says, "Dawson, they are just experimental study aid." And Dawson says, "Yeah, right. You would tell me, right, if something were wrong?" And Joey says, "Sure." And the teacher says, "Okay, people, success in the copy room. Now is a change of pace. This test includes short answers as well as essays." Dang, I would hate that if I were Joey. Like, in general, I think I would not like that at all. But one thing that kind of goes through my mind is Dawson is always like, "You would tell me if something was wrong, right?" You know what's wrong. Like, I feel like it goes along with the subtext. When Pacey, like, and Joey know something's wrong, they give each other, like, space. But meanwhile, when Dawson and Joey, like, have something wrong, like, they always, like, Dawson always does this. Like, he comes up and he's like, "You would tell me if something's wrong." I'm like, you know what's wrong is you and Gretchen get thing, because Gretchen is, like, a little bit older than you, and I don't think you're ready for that. So then we have the next scene, which is scene 3 of Pacey and Joey, and they're at the Potter B&B, and Joey is putting away some groceries while talking to Alexander about the test, and he just sits there, like, on the floor looking at her like, "What the heck is wrong with you?" And Joey says, "So, I messed up on the short answers, but who knows, the throne actually was the Empress handing you wins anyway. I mean, I think the worst it possibly could have done was a B-. Who am I kidding?" And Alexander, like, plays on the floor, and Joey says, "It's a C. I know. I'm dead. Alexander, please do yourself a favor. Stay off the road of overachievement. I'm telling you, it will lead to nowhere but heartache." That's why I think Joey would be such a good mom, because she just talks to the baby like it's a human. And Pacey enters carrying a bunch of groceries, and Pacey says, "Hey, went shopping." And Joey says, "Me too." And Pacey says, "Oh, well, you can never have too many groceries, especially if there's more unexpected guests dropped like last night." And I don't like the way that, like, Joey says the next line, because she goes, "Well, I'll take care of it like I did last night." Like, you were the one who pushed Pacey out the door and made, like, he literally put his hat and coat on, and now you're upset that you can't, like, be the, like, what? It makes no sense to me. I'm like, okay, Joey, whatever. Like, I get where she's coming from, at the same time I don't. Like, it would be funny if she just called him back, like, "Help me." And so Pacey said, like, he's, like, picking up the baby from off the floor, and he goes, "Come here, baby," all the way up the top of the floor, and the baby fusses, and Joey says, "Is there some underline or something?" Pacey says, what? You got the hiccups? He's talking to Baby. And he says, I just thought I would come by and cook us some supper, you know? Build some Lego castles, that way you can get study. And Joey says, I don't need to study tonight, Pacey. I need to study last night when I kicked you out. Remember that? Is that all coming back to you now? And Pacey says, oh, judging by your mood, I say the test went really well. And Joey says, it doesn't matter, okay? It doesn't matter how I did on the stupid test, because I can't undo it, and I can't retake it. It's over. And Pacey says, so you're really upset about some stupid test. And Joey says, I'm sorry, I can't let things roll off my shoulder, Pacey. I don't have the energy to buckle up and be in a good mood, okay? I'm tired. I'm so tired about worrying about Alexander. I'm so tired of waiting on people, and I'm so tired of doing everything by myself. And Alexander, fusses, and Joey, takes Alexander from, she's like, come here, Alex. And I think this is something that Joey is so used to doing, because obviously, Bessie and her have this relationship where, sometimes they'll act like they're, mother and daughter, where, they have to do things in a certain way, but sometimes they act like they're, co-workers, they have nothing else to do. And Joey, kind of has to act a bigger, her age, a lot bigger or something, because of how her life is. She has to deal with the B&B because her sister, it kind of goes back to season 1 where she had to be a waitress for a little bit, and there was all these responsibilities, and Dawson didn't get it. But meanwhile, Pacey's trying to help out. He's trying to be the bigger person, but there's, no other way for him to be the bigger person because Joey won't let him in. Mentally, in her heart, it's hard for her to let people in, because the moment she lets them in, it's all of a sudden she's kind of having to step out of her comfort zone. She's not used to Bessie, yeah, she's used to Bessie helping out and stuff, but she still has to do so many things. It was kind of like that one episode where Bessie was like, hey Joey, do you think you can mop the floor before you go to work? And this was in season 2. She's like, do you think you can do this before school? Do you think you can do this before school? And Joey's like, I'm still a teenager. I still have a life to do. And Bessie just kind of looked at her. But now it comes back to this, where Joey still has all those responsibilities like she had in season 1 and season 2, and even season 3. I feel like she had she did have a lot of responsibility in season 3. And now she's together with Pacey, and when she was together with Dawson, he didn't really get why she was so stressed out about this kind of stuff, and he never really helped out except the white fence and her dad, kind of having to help her out. And I feel like at this moment, it was not that Pacey wanted anything, because whenever Dawson would help out, it was because he wanted something. But when Pacey helped out, it was just the kindness of his heart. And so I feel like at this moment, she was trying so hard to let him in. But in another sense, it's kind of hard to let someone in when you're not used to letting people in. It's kind of okay, and why do I bother trying to let this person in at the end of the day if they're going to leave, or if they're going to hurt me, or if they're going to do this and that and that? It's kind of hard to let her in. Meanwhile, there's Pacey, who says, look, Joe, you don't have to do this by yourself, okay? That's why I'm here. I want to be able to help you, and I can't help you if you're not telling me the truth. And Joy says, this is the truth. And Pacey says, no, it's not. The truth is, what's bothering you is what happened between Dawson and Gretchen. And Joey says, I'm not upset about Dawson and Gretchen. And Pacey says, no, okay, maybe you're not, but you're certainly upset about Dawson and you. And Joey says, that is not true. And Pacey says, that's not true. And Joey says, no. And Pacey says, then please tell me the truth, because certainly it has nothing to do with you and me. You know, I haven't screwed anything up for at least a day or two. And Joey says, you know what? You have it. You never do. You are the perfect boyfriend, and you won the perfect boyfriend contest. You beat Dawson. Is that what you want to hear? And then, Alexander fusses. So, I think at this moment, though, it was kind of they fought over this, but it wasn't, it was kind of she just saw him trying to be it was a competition between him and Dawson, but really, like, he knew what was wrong. He saw what was wrong, and it was even bugging him in a sense. And he was trying to be that, like, bigger person to go up to her and tell her, like, hey, like, I know what's going on, and that's okay. And I feel like the reason why he said, like, I haven't messed up in a day or two is because, like, every time Joey's upset about something, she takes it out on him. Because I was telling someone this today where I was like, okay, like, if someone is going through something and you are the nicest person they know, 9 out of 10, they're going to take that on you. Like, they're going to take whatever's going on, whatever hurt is going on, and they're going to take that on you because they know that you are probably going to get mad and you'll fight with them, and that's what they want. And that's kind of what, like, Pacey and Joey are going through at the moment. And that's kind of what Joey does. As much as I love Joey, that is a problem that she does. So then we have the next scene, where it's scene 4 of Pacey and Joey, and they're at the Potter and B&B, and Joey enters the room after putting Alexander to bed, and Pacey is sitting on the couch waiting for her, and Pacey says, is she asleep? Or is he asleep? And Joey says, yep, and Pacey says, I did the dishes, and Joey says, thanks. And Pacey says, you know, I didn't come here to fight about Dawson. And Joey says, yes you did. And Pacey says, yeah, you're right, I did. I did come over to fight about Dawson, but only because this is becoming one of those things that we never talk about. Then I look up one day and you're gone. Which is ironic, because that does kind of happen. Like, he's afraid, basically, that they'll never talk about this kind of stuff, and they'll never, like, get over what's happening between her, Dawson, and him, and therefore, one day, it's going to be one of those things that are never talked about, and you know, like one of those friends that you used to have where you were so close with them, and then one thing kind of slipped, like, oh, I'll tell them tomorrow. Oh, that's okay, I'll tell them tomorrow. Oh, that's okay, I'll tell them tomorrow. And that tomorrow never comes, and so you're stuck there, like, not being able to tell them, and one day they're just gone. That's what Pacey means. And Joey says, what things, Pacey? And Pacey says, oh, things like in the future. And Joey says, we talk about the future. And Pacey says, no, Joey, we talk around the future. And Joey says, that's not true. I don't know why it bothers me that this Gretchen and thing, Dawson and Gretchen thing. And Pacey says, but it does bother you. It's okay if it bothers you. I just want to be able you to tell me. Don't shut me out from these things. And Joey says, Pacey, I do think about the future. I do. And Pacey says, so when you see, what do you see in the future? And Joey says, us. Me and you, Pace. We grew up together, and see, Dawson and I, we didn't grow up. We were in that house, in the Dawson's bedroom, entirely having the same argument over and over again, and this endless cycle that goes on and on and on. And I cannot stop it, because whenever I'm around him, I feel like I'm 15 again. And Pacey says, well, that's your problem. And believe me, this isn't easy for me to say. You have to talk to Dawson. And then, would you please call me? And I love how Pacey does this, because it's kind of like he took Gretchen's advice and he was like, okay, like, I can't be the bigger person in this. Like, I have to be the bigger person in this because it's obviously always going to haunt her. And I feel like he knows how it feels because him and Dawson are going through something right now. And so he knows how it feels to have, like, that thing where it's always going to haunt you and haunt you and haunt you. And obviously she needs to talk about it with Dawson, because if she doesn't talk about it with Dawson, then it's just going to keep bugging her, and she's just going to keep it taking it out on Pacey, and even Pacey knows that. So then we have scene 2 of Joey and Joey. And so she goes and takes Pacey's advice, and she goes into Dawson's room, and Joey is sitting there looking at the window waiting for Dawson when he comes into his room, and is obviously surprised to see her sitting there. And he goes, hey, and Joey says, hey Dawson, your mom said you'd be home soon, so I thought I would wait. I hope you don't mind. And Dawson says, no. And Joey says, I brought these Counting Cow CDs. And Dawson says, Joey, these are yours. And Joey says, I know. I figured we could pass them back and forth whenever we had something we need to discuss. Which I find kind of funny. And Dawson says, okay, what do we need to discuss? And Joey says, see, this afternoon in a Carson's class, I lied. I wasn't okay. I just blew that test. You know, Bessie and Bodie, they're gone, and suddenly there was people at the B&B, showed up at the B&B, and they had all these rooms ready, and I had to get all these rooms ready, and I had to take care of Alexander, and I tried to stay up all night cramming, but I fell asleep somewhere in the middle of chapter 7 to be in the field. Don't laugh, this is tragic. And Dawson says, you're gonna die if you get a B on a test. And Joey says, basically. And Dawson says, well, how did you get into this situation in the first place? Wasn't Pacey there to help you? And Joey says, yeah. And Dawson says, and he wasn't helping? And Joey says, I kind of want to let him. And Dawson says, you know, you should have let Pacey help you, especially with Alexander. I mean, he's great with kids, mostly because he's still one. I mean, that's in a good way. And then he hands her a Christmas present. But I just have to say, like, why is all of a sudden he's being so nice about Pacey? Like, that's unusual, but he is good. I feel like the reason why he's being nice about Pacey is because he's seen Pacey with, whoa, I just got a laser pointer on my, okay. It's because he's seen, like, Pacey with Buzz, and I feel like that's one of the reasons, which I'm like, where the heck is Buzz throughout this whole season, like, so far? Like, I thought we would have a reunited or something, but that's not how it went. And so, like I said, he hands her a gift, and it's a picture of, like, and Joey says, Dawson, you shouldn't have. I don't have yours. It's not Christmas yet. And Dawson says, I know, open it. Because obviously he wants to be the first one to open it. And Dawson hands her the gift, and she opens it, and she finds a picture of Pacey and Joey hugging by the Christmas tree, which I'm like, where did Dawson even get this picture from? Is it just me? Or I'm like, where did you get that picture, Dawson? Because that's a little bit creepy, if you ask me. Like, it's a little bit stalkerish, but whatever. And so Joey says, it's beautiful. And Dawson says, yeah, I'm getting better, and Joey says, no, that's not what I meant. And Dawson says, I know what you meant. And Joey says, that party was fun. And Dawson says, yeah, it had its moments. And Joey says, like, you and Gretchen? And Dawson says, that was not a moment. That was actually merely a holiday traditional. And Joey says, so what's the deal? You guys friends? And Dawson says, yeah, we're friends. What else would we be? And Joey says, I thought since you guys were kissing. And Dawson says, hey, please. Some of the cool 21 college girls don't generally fall for the dorky high school seniors. Which I was wondering how old, like, Gretchen was. Which I'm sure by now, like, Dawson was probably 18. So I'm like, that's still a little bit old. Like, I think, like, there's a lot of things that 21-year-olds and, like, 18-year-olds can, like, be. And I think, like, those are two different things that are very, very strong. I don't know, like, it always gets me. And so Dawson says, even if she wasn't interested in me, so why does this ruin a perfectly good friendship? And Joey says, these things don't always have to work out in that way. Look at us. After all we happen, and we're friends. If we aren't, you wouldn't have given me this. And if we wouldn't have been sitting here telling you whatever your heart tells you to do. Truth is, Gretchen would really be lucky to have someone like you. And she bends over and gives him a kiss on the cheek before leaving, and she says, thank you. Which I find sweet, but again, I'm like, does no one else find this creepy that, like, Dawson just randomly gives him a picture, like, here's my picture. I'm like, where did you get that from? So then we have the second scene of Pacey, and While Joey's doing that, Pacey, meanwhile, is at Cape Side High School where Mr. Kinsey is sitting at his desk going through some papers while Pacey comes into the room. And Mr. Kinsey says, "Pacey, Witter, I thought we weren't destined to meet today until fourth period. Or would you like to hang around in the junior English and have another go at Barney and the scrimmage?" And Pacey says, "No thanks. I would prefer not to." And Mr. Kinsey says, "Berlin's based off humor. Very impressive, Mr. Witter. So what can I do to help you?" And Pacey says, "Well, you guys in AP English had a test yesterday, right? A big test?" And Mr. Kinsey says, "Yeah." And Pacey says, "Well, let's suppose for a moment you have this person in your class who is generally a feminine student." And Mr. Kinsey says, "He or she?" And Pacey says, "You think you could help, you could keep it at bay for right now, just for argument's sake to remain gender neutral." And Mr. Kinsey says, "And compare it to the further convictions of English language as spoken in the North American continent. Please, by all means." And Pacey says, "Okay, let's suppose that this person needs to retake the test." And Mr. Kinsey says, "Because of illness?" And Pacey says, "No." And Mr. Kinsey says, "Family emergency?" And Pacey says, "No, not exactly." And Mr. Kinsey says, "Well, case closed." And Pacey says, "Mr. Kinsey, if you could just hear me out, willing to accept help from anyone. She's under a false impression that she is one single bee. The entire universe is going to just start to fall apart." And Mr. Dean says, "She?" And Pacey says, yeah, she." And Mr. Kinsey says, "I understand where you're coming from." And he goes, "Mr. Witter." And Pacey says, "Oh, you do?" And he goes, Mr. Kinsey says, "But I still have to say no. If I bend the rule for one person, I have to bend the rules for everybody." And Pacey says, well, I had to give it a try." And Mr. Kinsey says, "Which you did, unrightly." I love how Pacey did this. Like, no one can convince me that this is one of my favorite parts about this episode, because it's like Pacey took something, and he took his sister's advice, and he took everything that what was bugging Joey, and he smashed it into one, and he made it so amazing. And he, like, went up to the teacher, brave, may I add, and was like, "Hey, this is what's happening, and I need you to help out." Even though he said no and he had to make it fair for everybody, Pacey got that. He didn't argue, he didn't say anything. Like, he knew what he had to do in order to get Joey happy. And this is proof that Pacey would do anything to make Joey happy, and I love that fact. So then we have scene 3 of Joey, and she's in the Cape Side Library, and Joey is highlighting a lot of stuff in the book. And when Mr. Kinsey comes up to join her, and Mr. Kinsey says, a low-profile approach would be to read the book before the test. And Joey says, "I blew it, didn't I?" And Mr. Kinsey says, C-, certainly not your finest hour. But I'm guessing you already knew, considering the little visit I had this morning from your, I hesitate to use the term, better half. That is so cute. Like, you know it's a good relationship when the teachers know that you are dating. Like, that's how you know. When he says it like that, that's how you know they're really close. And Joe says, "Pacey?" And Mr. Kinsey says, "He asked me to give you a second chance, and I said no, of course. However, Prudence was an orphanologist again, so I'm giving a makeup tomorrow. And if you're interested in retaking the test, you could do that." And Joe goes, please? I mean, I would be really appreciate." And Mr. Kinsey says, "Don't thank me yet. I'm planning to pre-penalize your half a letter grade." And Joey says, "Okay." And Mr. Kinsey says, "And by the way, you're doing some serious damage with this highlighter." And he takes the highlighter from her and highlights a particular sentence, and Joey reads it out loud. And Joey says, "Near the end of March 1845, I borrowed an axe and went down to the woods by the wooden ponds. Nearest to where and Mr. Quincy says, what's the most important word in this sentence? And Joey says, blitz. And Mr. Quincy says, borrowed. The most important word to remember about this transition is that while self-reliance is the most admirable traits, therefore wasn't really all that alone out in the wooden pods. He had neighbors, friends, people he could rely on. He should be oh so lucky. I love that part of the scene. Like, I generally feel like what he meant was he saw how Joey was, like, obviously struggling, and so it makes sense that people are there for her. And even the teacher could see that. And my favorite part about this part is the fact that she took what he said and she's going to use it in the next part of this scene. So then we have the next scene, Pacey and Joey, and Pacey enters the door to find Joey waiting for him with a huge smile on her face. And Pacey says, you ring? And Joey says, I thought I'd call my boyfriend because I need a little help with something. And Pacey says, where's Alexander? And they're like walking around each other, which I found was funny. And she goes, watching a movie in Bessie's room, and he says, okay, now I'm getting suspicious. What's going on? And Joey says, I just wanted to thank you. And Pacey says, for what? And Joey says, the test. You got Mr. Quincy to let me retake the test. And Pacey says, I did? I mean, I knew that I did, but I didn't know that it was going to work. So this is great. So how'd you do it? And Joey says, oh, I get to retake it after school. So tonight, and she begins to kiss him when he stops her. And Pacey says, and Joey says, is there a problem? And Pacey says, well, you shall be. And Joey says, I did what you asked. All the ghosts walked firmly away, except for the ghost of For Christmas future. And there is really no reason. And Pacey says, well, there is something we should be doing. And that's where we see scene 6 of Pacey and Joey, where Pacey is sitting in the chair, quizzing Joey from flashcards while she sits there and holds Alexander. And Pacey says, trust bunnies. And Joey says, Emerson. And Pacey says, what? Truman's Magazine was edited by both Emerson and Dorrance. And Joey says, the dial. And Pacey says, Truman's took the name from Kate's criticism of, and Joey says, per reason. He goes, wrong, practical reason. And he kisses her, and she goes, oh, practical reason. And I love this scene so much. And Pacey goes, where is the book from, Barn? And Joey says, Worth Robinson's, Massachusetts. And he goes, you're good. I love this scene for many reasons. I love this scene because I like how she finally gets help. Like, she finally gets the courage to ask him for help, and he was willing to help. And it just took a matter of time and a matter of energy to really get into that moment. Like, I like how they were very, into it. They were very, trying to figure this all out. And I like how they were, dealing with one thing at a time. Like, one moment Joey and Pacey were fighting, the next minute, Pacey had done what Pacey normally does, and he walked up to her and he told her everything that was going on. And I love that part of the scene because it's Joey normally doesn't open up to people. It takes a moment for her to gather what's happening, and she could have known them for years. This could have happened, the same thing happened to Dawson, and Dawson wouldn't have done the extreme that that Pacey did for Joey. And I like that part of the scene because there's a lot of things that happen in life, but when you have someone who loves you and who cares about you and who wants the best for you, like Pacey does for Joey, it's kind of one of those things where it's not so hard to ask for help later, if that makes sense. And I feel like that's one of the main reasons why I feel like Pacey is such a good boyfriend for Joey, because he was made for her in so many ways that no one else can express. And so, if you like this podcast, please make sure to come back on Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. Make sure to review this podcast, give it 5 stars, leave a kind review, and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, that's Jacey's Creek Podcast, and leave your thoughts down below. You can put a thumbs up if you like, but please leave your thoughts down below, whatever you're thinking about this episode or a past episode, or even a future episode that you'd like me to mention. And lastly, if If you have not already, make sure to follow my Instagram, that's Witter and Potter, my TikTok, that's Pacey and Joey, and again, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Again, I post every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Do all the things. Bye guys.